Hello and welcome to Catching the Octopus podcast. Today, I wanted to talk with you about what we can do to show up in this systemized world around us in an effort to try and start fracturing some of these systems. So, living in a place for myself, a colonialized country, set up with patriarchal systems, it can be challenging sometimes. And if we look at what's happening around the world at the moment, we're seeing how those systems are actually creating harm. And not just for women and girls, but also for men. All right, so this is a universal issue. Now, being a woman myself and having been a girl who had suffered at that stage, my focus can tend to fall into that area. But this is something, like I said, that affects everyone. It's affecting our men, it's affecting our boys as well in the way that they're growing up into this space of seeing entitlement. Now, it doesn't take away the fact that the men and the boys sit higher in the hierarchy and they're already privileged in a particular way by this system, but we can't discount the harm that it's creating as well. And so this morning I did a park chat. Now, if you follow me on my socials, you'll see that every morning I try and do a little five to 8 minute chat around a particular topic. And I felt that it was a really good thing to expand on into a podcast episode. And so what my park chat was about is what are the little things we can do? Because it can be really difficult in a world that's facing so much trauma, horror, bad things happening everywhere. There's wars, there's this rape academy that's just surfaced, and we've had awareness of that. You know, in February alone, I think in March it was 80, but in February there was 62 million subscribers or logins to this account or this site. And so, yes, that might not have been one individual per login. One of those individuals may have logged in multiple times in the month, but it doesn't take away from the fact that there's this online space where men are going in, predominantly men, I haven't heard of any women included, where men are going in and sharing stories and videos and hints and tips on how to drug and rape their partners. So that's their wives, their girlfriends, all of those sorts of things. And so it's a really bringing to the forefront. You know, we've had the Epstein files. We had Gazelle Pellicot in France, where her husband was drugging her and getting multiple men to come in and to rape her. And I think there was 100 in the end. They only charged 50 of them. So 50 men are still walking free. And then that goes into the space as well, that those 50 fall into the statistics possibly of wrongly accused because they weren't actually convicted. So we look at this and we go, oh, but women, you know, wrongly accuse men all the time. No. Those statistics kind of sometimes fall into it. It's just that there wasn't a conviction for that man. Doesn't mean it didn't happen. Doesn't mean she was lying. And so we need to change some of our framing around some of these things. Now, like I mentioned in the text of my park chat, not everyone is set up to be able to organise protests or rallies or marches and things like that. And not everyone's able to actually attend those either. So although they're really big things we can do, there's also littler things, smaller impacts that we can make, because if we can't change the world outside of us, then we can focus on what we can do to change the world inside of us and then how that actually affects. And that can start fracturing some of these systems, right? And some of these programs that we've built to live within the society that we're built to live within. And one of those, the first thing I started with was imposter syndrome. So actually looking at reducing your internal imposter syndrome, because when we feel like we're not enough to be able to show up in spaces, one, that can prevent us from speaking up in areas that we need to speak up in. But also it creates a world where we're smaller and we don't, you know, step outside of our boundaries. We don't try new things. We don't progress. We fall within this space where we think, oh, this is all I'm good enough for. And so the system continues winning and manipulating and creating the scenarios that we show up in. Once we look at that self-worth element and we get that, there's also other little things we can do as well. Now, I think someone framed these as micro-feminisms, right? Now, again, going into the word feminism and feminists, let's start there and then we'll go into those micro-feminisms. But within that terminology as well, that has been given a lot of stigma around the word feminist. So if someone says they're a feminist, you may be imagining in your mind someone with unkept hair, unshaved, not clean, dressed in raggy clothes, all of those sorts of things, because they don't want us to be able to attach to that and go, hey, that's a great idea. Let's all jump on the bandwagon. Now, it's completely false, because a feminist can be a man or it can be a woman. So the image they've already given you is a woman, right? That's unkept and unruly and doesn't have the intelligence of other people. And then they can have, with feminism as well, our life is built on feminism, especially from a woman's perspective and also from a man's. Men have benefited from feminism as well. I wouldn't be able to have my own mortgage at the moment. I've got a mortgage of my own home. That would not have been possible before the 70s. I was born in the 70s. So if I was born earlier, then I probably wouldn't have the opportunities I have today, purely driven by feminists and feminism. I wouldn't be able to have my own bank account. I wouldn't be able to, in some places, even get divorced, from a marriage that wasn't working. I would be expected to serve my husband in every way, even physically, even if I didn't feel like it, if it wasn't for feminism. I mean, it came to a point where they changed laws, but before that, a woman wasn't even actually allowed to put in complaints about physical abuse or sexual abuse by their husbands, because they were their husbands, right? So feminism has shifted this whole space. I wouldn't be able to go to uni. I wouldn't be able to have a job. I wouldn't be able to be on social media. This podcast wouldn't be a reality without feminism. So I'm very grateful for that. And I think sometimes we miss the point of that. And it's those loud, challenging women that challenge the systems and challenge the norms that have got us to where we are. Now, when we look at men, there's a lot of men that like to actively be involved in their family, right? Some people just want to be a father. Some people want to be a dad. Some people really want to get in there, some of these men, and help raise their children and go to their sporting events and be at their concerts and their school assemblies and take care of 50% of the load at home and take the pressure off their wife. And that wouldn't be possible without feminism either, because, men wouldn't be able to go in and approach work for leave, to be able to have leave for that, because the society and the systems would say, why do you want to do that? That's not valid, and wouldn't allow that. So, feminism has changed the whole structure of our society, and it continues to do so, although it's not as fast as we would like. And when we look at women creating change as well, although I acknowledge that I'm a white woman, so I still sit higher in the hierarchy of a patriarchal system than someone who is coloured or someone who is Asian descent or someone that doesn't look like a traditional white Western woman. And so acknowledging that as well, you'll find that a lot of women will also speak out about those other minority groups because they understand what it's like to be oppressed. But we also have to acknowledge that we still get it better than a lot of other people, right? And although the system definitely is completely broken, it's then using that privilege that we have to go, well, how can we step up and do something different and create a different place and a different environment for everyone, not for the women, for the men, for Aboriginal people in Australia, for immigrants, for everyone. We are the commonality, right? The system wants us to believe that there's a segregation, because if we all came together, how much power would we have, right? We'd be able to overturn systems like our taxation system in Australia. It's our big corporations, mining corporations, gas corporations and gas and oil, they make so much money and are taxed very little compared to countries like Norway, who have great socialized systems because of the taxation and the finances they have. They have great healthcare, they have great education systems, they have great welfare, and their happiness scale is up. And so one thing I do feel is that all of this stuff that's going on in the world at the moment, something has to crash and burn before it can be rebuilt. And I do feel internally that this is the crash and burn phase. It doesn't mean I want to sit here complicitly and just watch it and let it happen. I still want to be able to contribute in my way. But it does give me a little bit of hope that we will rebuild. And when we rebuild, my hope and what I'm looking to manifest is that we rebuild where happiness and well-being is a priority rather than profits for people that already have billions of dollars, right? But anyway, that's a whole different podcast. So coming back into those micro-feminisms that I was mentioning before. So with micro-feminisms, they're little acts you can do that readjust the power balance, right? Readjust the bar. And although this is something that we do externally, it really is designed to change our own internal belief systems and the way that we show up in the world. And although, like I said, we might not be able to change the world as a whole, we can change us. And that's where it all starts, right? So one of them is when emailing people. Generally, we will email or we'll address letters or we'll do invitations, and it's always the man's name first, right? Traditionally, right? I'm not saying that everyone does that now, but traditionally, if you look at it, it would be the male man and then the woman. And even if I've seen emails where the woman holds a higher position, but it's still the man's name than the woman. Now, people aren't intentionally doing this. This is that unconscious training that we've had from society, right? So recognizing that and switching it up. Start with the woman, regardless of her position, start with her, and then write out the rest with the men. If you're doing invitations, start with the woman and then have the man's name. Now, I have seen people that have had weddings where they've put the woman and then the man. I have had invitations come to me with the woman and the man, but generally everything sits with the man and the woman. So that's one little thing you can do to change it up. Also, if you go into meetings, whenever you go into meetings, generally we're drawn to go and introduce ourselves to the man first or meet the man first, because traditionally the man has always held a position of more power. And so unconsciously we want to go and meet the person that's got the most power, because then we can create rapport and relationships that then ended up getting us better benefits from that. So one thing I've changed up now is when I walk into a room, I will seek out the woman and I will go and introduce myself to the woman first, and then I will introduce myself to the men in the room. And this in myself then creates a different balance of, okay, my bias, because I have a gender bias. So again, we'll do another sidestep quickly here. Part of my psychology degree, I did what's called an implicit association test. So what that does is it shows up different images and different words, and you've got to click on those, and they're either got a association with a man or with a woman. And it tracks the speed that you did it. So if you have a hammer and a man, and then you have a mop and a woman, sorry about the generalization, but just using it for an example, then traditionally when we have a bias, which I believe is pretty much, I don't think I've met anyone that doesn't, right? So it's a commonality. It's not a gender-based thing. The bias will then have us hitting hammer quicker with a man and broom quicker with a woman than what we would hit hammer with a woman and broom or mop with a man. Right. So I did this test. It showed I had a bias. It showed that my reaction speed matched those things up towards the traditional conceptions. And that got me thinking, because I didn't think that I had a bias. And so that got me thinking a little bit more about the way that whole world is structured, etc. And that's actually influenced my study as well with my PhD. In showcasing, okay, this happens to everyone. This is how we might be able to create some adjustments here. But anyway, back to the micro-feminisms. So what these are designed to do is they're not designed to showcase women and put down men. What they're designed to do is shake up that internal bias that exists within us so that we are coming into a space that has more clarity and less bias in the way that we interact with the world, because it's the bias that help sustain these systems, these patriarchal systems and these capitalist-based systems that are at the moment, in my opinion, ruining the world. So you can do that when you're meeting people. Also, when you're thinking or talking about people in positions of power that traditionally have been men, like doctors and lawyers and CEOs and things like that. If you find yourself, take note, you'll possibly envisage a man. When that happens, shift that up and actually make your default thinking visioning a woman. And when someone has the conversation, they're talking about something like that, ask the question, oh, what did she say? Now, that's going to trigger them a lot of the times. I find when I do that, they pull a bit of a face like she. It's not a she. But it gets them to start thinking, hang on, why did I get upset that they thought that was a she? Is that because generally that would be a he? And, I had a conversation down the dog park with someone actually many years ago when I first started my business, and I was talking to them and I was like, oh, yeah, I went to the chamber, the Bunbury Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and I met with the CEO and we're having this big chat. And this person automatically went, oh, did you tell him? And I went, no, I didn't tell him because it's a her. And they were like, oh. And now I didn't do that to offend them. I did that just to point out that it was a woman that was the CEO of the chamber. But instantly in our minds, whether we're a woman or whether we're a man, we would generally think a CEO of a business community would fall into being the male gender. So that's another thing you can do. There's so many other things. I also find as a woman, and other people may or may not have experienced this, but if I'm walking down a path, men tend not to move. Now, I don't think they intentionally do this. Again, it's that programming space that they're at the top of the hierarchy. And so you'll often find women will move out of their way when you're walking down a footpath or walking in a shopping centre. I no longer move, right, now that I've been aware of that. And I'm not doing it to be a dissenter and I'm not doing it to cause pain, but I'm doing it to showcase that we're equal. Now, there are exceptions to this rule. If they're carrying a lot of bags or if they have a pram or if they have a trolley or something like that, yeah, I will move because I know how frustrating it can be to try and maneuver some of those things when you're in those positions. But if they're purely walking with me, I'll step aside slightly, but not completely out of the way. And then I will look at something else as I'm walking. If you keep eyeballing them, they won't move. Right, this is my experience. They don't move. But if you see them, acknowledge them, move a little bit out of the way and then just look around, they'll move a little bit out of the way, right? And it's creating that space where not one or the other has a priority because we're all people. None of us should have a priority in a common space, but we do. And when I say priority in a common space, some people may go into if there's a disaster, it's women and children, they're prioritized. I need to back that up a little bit. That actually was implemented because they had to create some sort of fairness, because when there was a disaster, generally men look out for themselves. I don't know if you've seen some of the videos around of men, when there is something going on, they'll push their wives into different things like scare pranks and stuff like that. Not a lot of men are wired to be in that protecting space. And if anything, women are more wired to be protectors because we have to. We've had to our whole lives. We've had to protect ourselves. We've had to be aware of the situation around us, our environment, because it could jeopardize our safety. Our mates are our biggest predators statistically. And so we have to be consciously aware of everything going around. And then when we have children, or if there are children around us, even if they're not our own, we instantly go into that protective instinct. Now, that can be, you can say that's genetic as well, but a lot of it is programmed in us because who else is going to protect them? Now, men do form protecting roles, but a lot of the time, not saying 100%, but majority of the time, the men that will protect women and children protect their women and children, right? Because there's an ownership of it. It's their wife, their mother, their sister, their child. That's who they'll protect, and not generally protect anyone else because they feel like they've got a bond with someone. That's what they use. Whereas women are more wired where it doesn't matter if there's a bond. If someone's hurting, we're there to protect them. And I've got an example of this. It's another dog park example. Excuse my dog park examples. But down the dog park, and I was speaking with this person who was a man. We were just having a conversation, and I, being aware of my environment, I'm always who's there, what's going on. And I was watching this lady walking her dogs, and I saw a man on a push bike behind her. And I thought, okay, and I kept talking, and then I looked over again, and I noticed that he was still the same distance behind her. And in my head, I've already gone, well, he's on a push bike. You'd think he would be in front of her by now. And then she continued walking around. At this point, she was safe because she was in around us. And this man was still the same distance on a push bike behind her. Now, instantly, I pricked up. And I mentioned to the other man, I went, that's sus. That guy is on a push bike and he's not actually overtaking her. He's just following her. So the man looked as well and looked at it and he goes, oh, no, she looks like she's all right. and it still didn't sit well with me. So I watched them go around, and just before they were going to go into the actual bushy part of the park, I ended up calling out to her and I went, "Oh, excuse me." And she's like stopped and I went, "Oh, I just thought I'd check and see how you're going." And she goes, "Yeah, I'm fine." I went, "No, no." And I looked at him and I looked at her. I went, "How are you?" And she goes, "Oh, that's my husband." She said he comes down because he wants to protect me if anything happens to me because I come early down the dog park. And I straight up went, "Oh, I'm really sorry. I didn't realize. In my fairness, I saw this man not overtaking you and staying there." She goes, "I get it." And she said, "No, thank you very much for that." And we give credit where credit's due. As the man come up, he said, "Thank you very much for that." Now, the man I was with was like, "Oh, she looks all right." Right? Because they're not wired to see the same level of danger. And this isn't I'm not doing it to shame men because they've also been raised in the same system we have. They've just got an alternate experience on it. And, the men's mental health issues that we're experiencing at the moment, down to the system, right? Men were always taught, don't cry, be tough, get up, go out, provide, do this, do that. And a lot of them don't have any meaning in their life. Whereas women were raised in a space that was more compliant and more serving, but serving actually does give you some meaning, right? And so we will go and create collectives. Our friendships are deeper. We might not see a therapist all the time, but our friendships and the sharing of stories that we do helps as therapy. You see men and you ask the men personal questions about their mates and they may not really know anything. You ask a lot of men personal questions about their partner and their kids as well, and they might not know anything. There's heaps of videos going around where you can see when men are asked, what's the birthday of their child, what's their child's teacher's name, what's their child's best friend name, and oblivious. And then the mum will come up or the woman will come up and just go bang, bang, bang and name it all, right? But then they've asked the same man about, their favourite football player or favourite sports player, and they're able to name off a whole range of statistics. And so I won't say though that they're not interested in their children's life, but they've been raised in a way that isn't a priority for them to know those things. And the way our brain works in schemas, right, and creates mental shortcuts. And I'm sure in all of the men's minds, it's like, oh, well, my wife knows all that. I don't have to. And then this goes into another level of a different podcast that we'll probably talk about. I have to go to a new podcast about the unrecognized cognitive load and the physical and emotional labor that women carry in relationships that men don't recognize. Right. So yeah, so this has created, imbalance in relationships. Now, back in the past, people would actually say, our relationships lasted longer. People didn't run away as easily. No, but go back to my point earlier on where I said you couldn't divorce, right? So women couldn't leave their husbands. And if they did leave their husbands, they weren't able to work. They weren't able to have a bank account. They weren't able to have a mortgage, weren't able to sign a lot of legal contracts either without a man. So there's those issues then that kept them in those relationships. And unfortunately, if you talk to many older women now that, had 10, big families, 10 kids, those sorts of things, they will share that a lot of that wasn't them wanting those children. It was because their body was overtaken and the man just took what he wanted and then bang, they end up with a child. So the systems have been silently affecting, and now people are becoming vocal. And so as we become vocal about this and we start bringing awareness to this, now it's become an issue, unfortunately, for men, more predominantly for men. It's always been an issue for men, but it's never been recognized socially as much as what it is today, because a woman can just leave. And, women get to a point, especially in perimenopause, when all of the masks come off, we get to a point where we go, wow, like for me, when I was married, I never would have left my marriage. I was conditioned and I had the belief systems that marriage was forever. And I haven't changed that. I do still think marriage is forever. Although I also do endorse personal choice. If people want to leave a marriage, that's completely up to them, but I would never convince someone to do it. So even if my friends are having discussions with me, about troubles in their relationship, or even clients that come to me that are having issues with their relationship, I will give them as much advice as I can to work with it for as long as they can before they make the decision to end it. because it's not a pleasant experience, right? Let me tell you, ending a marriage is quite traumatic emotionally. It's not fun. I wouldn't recommend it for anyone. But the offset of that now is I get to live a life where I can make my own decisions. I'm not worrying about setting up events, booking appointments, all of the things that were cognitive, paying all the bills, making sure everything was in order, planning holidays and getaways. And although I still do that for me and my kids, having one less person to do that with is a huge amount of less pressure. Also, the men that I have been in relationships with, not saying all men, but the men I have been in relationships with have not been able to regulate their emotions as well as I have. So if something goes wrong, they get upset or they get angry or they sit in depressed moods, and then trying to manage and emotionally regulate them as well, because so that the energy in the house stays uplifted, because, positive energy in the house creates more harmony. So I could go on, but I'm just trying to showcase that it's not just a man issue or a woman issue or a anti-woman or anti-man issue. This whole system that's been set up has affected all of us. We're all affected. And then don't get me started on some of the other minority groups. Like, they've just been pushed down, because if they're pushed down, then we can elevate us and we look like we're great and we're squeaky clean, right? And so when we're looking at little things that we can do, it's changing those belief systems. It's setting different standards. I'm dating at the moment, or I'm on some dating apps. I was chatting with one person, and I realized at one point I was kind of asking all the questions. Now, granted, he was still messaging me in the morning and saying, good morning, how's your day looking, and those sorts of things. But real questions like, what's your favorite music? What do you do for fun? What's a hobby? Or those sorts of things. They were questions I was asking. And I was looking at it, and even in that first dating sense, I was carrying the labor of getting to know each other. And so I pulled back, and that for me was an indicator of this isn't someone that I want to be with, right? But, and I would probably get to know them as a friendship, but it would never go any further. But in fairness to him, he's never probably been taught how to communicate properly, right? He probably doesn't realize the depth that it creates, because men have just been taught to be at that superficial level, and that's enough. But it's also then creating bigger issues in a community aspect where men are feeling lonely, and we have this loneliness epidemic for men. They don't form the kind of deep relationships that actually foster well-being. They don't have the purpose to find in their life. They're not volunteering, or they're not going out and doing all of those other things, because that's not manly enough. All of the constructs that are being put on them are not helping them either. Now, it's not my place to go and fix that, because I feel like, again, the weight of fixing things has kind of fallen on women. Even when women couldn't work, women were behind the scenes making sure that they set these men up so that they could work the hours they needed to do the travel they needed to do. And more often than not would probably be there as their defrag partner, giving them advice and suggestions on what to do. Or they would have a personal assistant, which was a woman that would just do everything. So structurally and societally, there's an expectation from us as well, from women and from men, that we'll just step up and we'll just do it. And I think that's something as well that we need to change. We have to step back and allow these men to empower themselves to be able to do these things. I saw a post the other day that said, a woman will get mad and a man go down and get the wrong milk and come back, instead of just telling exactly what the milk is that they need. Right. And I kind of smiled. And then I went to the comments, and it was gold. And one of the comments was, how do you not know the kind of milk that you have in your fridge, right? Do you not use it? Do you not use it on the kids' breakfast? Do you not see what's in the fridge? Did you not check before you went? Another comment that was great that said, oh, you tell us to go down and get 1023 screws, and we come back with 1026 screws and say, I'll just cross thread it, it'll be okay. Another comment said, oh, but screws are different. They actually impact the end game, whereas loading a dishwasher or folding towels for a cupboard doesn't affect the end game. Love the comments. Another one came in and went, yeah, well, if you don't load the dishwasher properly, the dishes don't come out clean and they have to be redone and recycled. If you don't fold the towels properly, when you stack them in the cupboard, then they'll topple over. And then it's usually the woman's responsibility, if they're the one that's there, to reorganize and put them all back. Traditionally, a man would see them fall out and just shove them all back in, close the door, and walk away. Now, I know I've got some heat before by going, it's not when I've said it's all men. So I'm very conscious now about saying, look, it's not all men. But when I talk about statistics. I know that there's women out there that can't load a dishwasher the same or that fold towels and their cupboards are falling apart. I get it. It happens. But how we're primed to think from the way that we're raised and the way that society works is that it's not a man's job to do that. So when a man does that, we're like, oh, and we're worshipping them. What a great dad. What a great husband. When really that's the bare minimum, right? And what I've realized is the things that we praise men for doing in our society these days, because for so long they never did it. So when they start doing it, it gets noticed and it should be acknowledged 100%. But a really fantastic, exceptional man in the way that he shows up. So if he shows up and he's helping with the cooking of dinner, if he's doing shopping, if he's stacking the dishwasher right, if he's washing bed linen and even like making the bed properly. I had a partner that would make the bed but wouldn't actually put the fitted sheet under. So when we're sleeping, it would come up and I'd have to wake up and go and fix the sheet, right? If he's folding clothes properly, the way I do my washing, I flick my clothes when I hang them out so I don't have to iron them. I've had other people do my washing for me and they haven't flicked and then I've had to do ironing. So it's added extra workload, right? So if he's doing that properly, if he's, vacuuming properly and getting it all up and mopping properly and doing all the things properly and even sometimes not properly, if he's just doing these things, we think he's amazing. But that's just an average woman, right? And so we're being conditioned in this space where we actually think men that show up are amazing when that's what they should be doing. It's just that the world hasn't been set up to show them that, teach them that, and support them in doing that. And I think that's what we're actually shifting at the moment. And that's where these micro-feminisms come in really helpful because we can change us in the way that we show up. Now, I'm very vocal in the dating space. If I'm talking with someone, I will upfront ask, what are you looking for? Are you looking for something serious? Are you looking for something casual, something in between? And then once they answer and they ask me, what am I looking for? I will tell them I'm not looking for a partner to move in with me. I'm not looking for that in particular because I am very hesitant about having a man in my space again. I've never had such a great vibe in my house as when I don't have a man in it. I'm not saying all men, there might be one that comes in that blows me off my feet and just makes me change my paradigm there, but that's my experience and the experience I see with a lot of other people as well. I also don't want a man moving in because I don't want to be the one that it falls on to have to do all of that hidden emotional and physical labor in a relationship. And so what I'm looking for is someone that has their home. I have my home. We catch up. We're exclusive. It's committed, but it's not in a live-in situation. Now, I've been told that that's too unrealistic and I'll never find that. Fine. I don't need it. It would just be a nice to have. So if it happens, great. And if it doesn't, I've already set up a really great life. I have wonderful support systems. I have amazing friends. I have a really great relationship with my kids. I have my pets that love me unconditionally. I have all the things that I need to live a really fulfilling life. A relationship isn't a must have. But unfortunately, the way that the patriarchal systems have been set up and the capitalist systems have been set up, it sets up for a two-income family, right? To be able to exist in a capitalist system. The patriarchal system has been set up that a man has a partner to help support them, right? And so men are the ones that are feeling the brunt of this more than the women, unfortunately for them. But we've all got to come together scratch all the rest of this hierarchy, come together as a unique group, invite in our Indigenous or our Aboriginal friends, inviting our immigrant friends, invite in anyone that doesn't look completely like a traditional Western white person. We need to all collaborate together, all genders, all races, all cultures, Muslim friends, our Arab friends, everyone to come in together and go, you know what? This is where we live. This is our country. We've had enough. But the first steps of doing that is changing ourselves and recognizing our own biases and creating shifts in that. So a lot of content today. I really need to get it off my chest because my park chat today really inspired me, and I hope that it's given maybe a little bit of thought that you can put to it, and maybe even have a think as well. What are some other micro-feminisms I can do? What are some other things that I can do within myself that can change the way that my brain automatically thinks and adjust what the biases are that society, caregivers, life has created within me? Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I look forward to sharing with you again in our next episode.